Today I wanted to share 4 simple exercises using chess.com's vision trainer that I think if you do consistently will significantly help your board vision. And I think board vision is very important, and I think it's an underestimated tool to help with chess improvement. Because if you think about it, um, all the pieces, they play on the theater of the board. And so if you really have a good picture of the board and a good understanding of the board, it helps with tactics and calculation, just kind of decreases friction with a lot of things that are very important in chess. And so sometime quite a while back, I started trying to actually train my board vision. And as a player who improved mostly as an adult, I think it's been very helpful. So I think this is especially important for adults that didn't play a ton of chess when they were kids. I think if a person plays a lot of chess when they're a kid and just sits in front of the board for a long period of time, a lot of this stuff is just comes kind of natural and intuitive to that player for the rest of their life. But for those of us who didn't play thousands of hours of chess when we were under 20, I think it's very helpful to kind of exercise that part of our brain. And so I'll show what I think is a kind of a simple way that if you do it consistently, it helps significantly. And then in the future, I'll probably show some more advanced exercises if you really want to like push this further. But I think just doing this consistently would go a long way. And so chess.com has this chess vision trainer, and you can get to that under the More tab. There's this place called Vision, so you can go there. Or if you wanted to, in the search bar, you can just type in vision and it'll come right up. And basically what it is I'll hit the start button here. It'll say a square and you're supposed to click on that square. And I think it probably gets used in a way that maybe isn't the most effective. People just see how fast they can get all these squares. So basically if you hit the start button, you can see up here, it says flash B6 on the screen, and then it says B6 here in the upper right corner. And then if you click on B6, it tells you the next one and so on. And a lot of people will, I think, probably just see how fast they can go. But I'm going to propose using this tool in a different way. And I think if you do this like most days of the week, and if you did it as like a warm-up before you play your games of chess for that day, I think over time, you'll notice significant improvement in your board vision. And so what I would suggest is doing basically 4 different things, but 3 of them you can kind of do all at one time, and the last you just do, separately. But what I would propose is that we'll look at another blank board here just so that I can highlight squares. The way that I'm going to start doing it is I'm going to go in the vision trainer. So it tells me the square H5. Now instead of just clicking on H5, I'm going to do 3 different things. I'm going to first look at the square, close my eyes, and then state what color that square is. So if we look at H5, it's a white square. And I know this might seem a little strange at first. I got the idea from a Perpetual Chess Podcast, episode number 97 with Alex King. And I did his suggestion. Actually, I did it with flashcards sometime back after that podcast came out. And instead of using like this vision trainer, I would use these flashcards, and it helped me significantly. And that's why I think using this tool would be even more efficient. But so step number 1, just say what color the square is without looking at the board. And if you can't do that, that's okay. Then just look at the board and just mentally note what color the square is. And the idea is over time, you will start to know these colors because you'll start to see patterns. And I'll talk about that at the end. Some kind of techniques to use to make this a little bit easier. So step 1, just state what color that is. Step number 2, state what its corresponding square is. And so the corresponding square of H5 is actually A4. And I know this isn't like corresponding squares in end games, like the techniques of, where your king has to be when the other person's king is on a different square. It's nothing like that or the opposition or anything like that. It's just think of it as kind of like a mirror image. And what square, on the white side is equivalent and the same color, kind of like a mirror image, as the black square. So these two are corresponding squares. The corresponding square of E5 is D4. Likewise, the corresponding square of D5 is E4. Corresponding square of A1 is H8, and so on and so forth. And instead of explaining kind of like the importance of that, I would recommend watching that podcast with Alex King. He's big into board visualization. And he's exceptionally good at solving chess puzzles and blindfold chess and stuff like that. And I think part of it is his appreciation for how important it is to just be able to see the board and understand the board and the interaction of the squares of the board. So that's step 2. After you say what color the square is, say what its corresponding square is. And then step 3, let's say the computer's came up with the square E4, visualize the diagonals and state which squares the diagonals hit the edge of the board. So each one will have 2 different diagonals if it's not on the edge of the board or in a corner. And so we would state which squares it ends at. So for E4, it would be B1, A8, H7, and H1. And this may be hard at first, but you'll notice over time it becomes easier. And I've noticed like mine is starting to fade since I haven't actively done this for a while. That's why I'm going to start this up again. And I think the key is consistency. Like I warm up and do like this vision thing, but I haven't been doing this where I state the color of the square, the corresponding square, and where the diagonals of that square hit the edge of the board. And so that would be the first thing you do. And the key is don't be frustrated if you can't do it. Just if you can't visualize it in the beginning, that's fine. It'd be surprising if you could, if you haven't done this kind of thing before, or if you haven't played a ton of chess. So then what I recommend is you just then look at that square and then just mentally note these factors. So just, look at E4, say, okay, it's a light square, corresponding square is D5, and then look at where it hits the edge of the board. And so you can do that as many times as you want. It'll probably take you the full 30 seconds. This vision drill lasts for 30 seconds. So you'll probably only do one at a time. And depending on your time, you can choose if you want to just do one, if you want to do 2. I think just doing one, is fine. And then I'll show you as we do it, we'll flip the board so we do it from the black side as well. But let's go into the actual vision trainer and let's just run through this process. So first step I would do is I would take these coordinates off the side of the board. If you click on this button here, you take the coordinates off. I think it's key. You want to get so you know those squares without having to look at the board. So then what we can do is if I hit the start button here, it'll have a square, it'll have a name of a square pop up on the board, but also up here in the upper right side of the board. So don't look at it on the board, look at it on the upper right side of the board, and then close your eyes and try to do those 3 things. I'll just cover my eyes up like this after I see it. And then after we do it, we'll compare our answers to what we see when we look at the actual board. So let's see. So we got H7, so cover your eyes. It'll tick down 30 seconds, but don't worry about it. Okay, so H7 is a light square. Its corresponding square is A2. Okay, that's a light square on the opposite mirror image reflection part of the board. And then this one, since it's on the edge of the board, it only has 2 diagonals. It runs, it's a very short diagonal where it hits at G8 is one diagonal. And then its long diagonal ends at B1. Okay, so now we've gone through that process. Now we'll open our eyes and double check and see how we did. So H7, it is a light square. Its corresponding square is A2. Hits the edge of the board at G8. And it hits the edge of the board at B1 on the long diagonals. So you don't want to do a ton of this in one day. It's more about consistency that will help over time as you really try to like focus on these squares. And you'll get a headache if you try to do it too long. It's be like playing blindfold chess if you're not at the point where you could play blindfold. So I wouldn't like do long sessions of this, but if you did this maybe 2 or 3 times would be all you need to get a good benefit over time. Even once will help. And then what I do is after you've done this exercise, naming these 3 different things about the square, you can just hit the start button and click on the squares as they come up. And the idea is not to go, all out as fast as you can. Picture the square in your head, then look at the square, and then have your mouse move to the square. The idea is to just learn these squares and have them sink in and see them. And then in combination with these other exercises, you'll improve your board vision over time. So just hit, the start button, wait till it pops up, E4, look at it, move your mouse to it, A1, F4, H4, D2, D5, and just go through this. It's only 30 seconds. But the key is you're not going super fast. You're going fast enough, but you want to be able to see these before you move your mouse to it. It's not a race. And so I would say a pace of maybe 15 to 20 would be pretty good. And then my suggestion is you repeat the process. I won't do it on this video because you can imagine what I'll be doing. But change this to black and then do the same thing. Go through that 3-step process. Picture it in your head, pretend you're sitting behind the black side of the board, or you're playing the black pieces, pretend you're sitting on that side of the board. Do the thing where you close your eyes, name what color the square is, its corresponding square, and where its diagonals hit the edge of the board. I think you'll really be surprised. Now, this takes time. It'd probably be a month to 2 months before you really start to notice a difference, but then you'll notice like a big difference, and it will help the rest of your chess because, like I said, it all takes place on the theater of the chessboard. So one little thing I would give as a suggestion too, and this could be different for different people, but after I listened to his podcast, I tried to start, actually what I did is when I went on walks, I had these flashcards, and when I went on walks for exercise, I just have a square on here, and I would do those 3 things, and then I had the answer written on the back, and I would really try to visualize, as I was doing it. One thing to help you visualize the board, and it can be helpful with the corresponding squares, is I think there's 5 things to really kind of like burn into your brain, and it's actually only really 2 things. One, an obvious one, is these 4 central squares. Just really know those, because like if you can really visualize this well, then you know that F4 is right next to E4. Then you easily know that F4 is a dark square because you know so well that E4 is a light square. And then the other thing that I would do is in the 4 corners of the board, really know these corners well. And you notice that the bottom left part here, the corner that's A1, A3, C3, and C1, those are dark squares. And those squares correspond with these squares over here, F8, F6, G7, H8, and H6. So then you'll notice when you go to the other 2 corners, they're on light squares. And kind of burn those images into your head and know that these 2 images connect over this long diagonal. These 2 corner sets of squares connect over this dark squared long diagonal going through the center. And then obviously connect those two corresponding squares. And as you do it over time, you start to notice all these different relationships between the pieces, between the squares. And I think that's very helpful. And you'll be surprised some of the things you kind of notice over time that aren't part of these exercises, but just by focusing, taking the time to slow down and focus on this, you start to notice these different relationships between the squares. I think it's actually really helpful. So that's what I'm going to start trying to do more of. I have been doing the thing where I warm up and do it from the black side and the white side. I've been pretty good about that, warming up before the games, but I haven't been doing this thing where I'm looking at the corresponding squares, the color of the squares, and where it hits the edges of the board. And I think one thing you'll notice is especially if you do the thing where you say, okay, where does it hit the edge of the board? Here, 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 here on the diagonals. You will notice that after you do this for a while, you don't drop as many pieces. Like a lot of times people that are like club level players will drop a lot of pieces on, like on longer diagonals that, say somebody's dragon bishop, they'll have a bishop here or something, and they'll get some tactic like on the B7 square. You'll be better at not falling into that kind of stuff because you kind of see those squares as related subconsciously as you're doing it. So anyway, I do think that will be very helpful if this doesn't come like really instantly fast to you, like when you do these little exercises. Over time, you'll get much better at it. And if it doesn't come like instantly to you, if you can't know these, it means, you got room for improvement on your board vision and just how well you understand the board. And then sometime in the future, we'll put together some more advanced exercises because there's different things, interesting things you can do, not necessarily with the vision trainer, but just exercises in general. So anyway, I hope you found that useful. Have a good one. Take care.